Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harris and I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books. And today we're going to be going through the absolute line from DC Comics. So, are DC Comics a fantasy and science fiction book? We're just going to say yes. Um, one of them's that, in fact, two of them are definitely fantasy and science fiction. So, there's 3 books out so far. We have got Absolute Batman, Absolute Wonder Woman, and Absolute Superman. The concept of the Absolute Universe is that Darkseid has removed one of the key aspects for every character. So Batman is not rich, Superman did not grow up on Earth, and Wonder Woman didn't grow up with the Amazons. She grew up in hell. And I think that of the 3 concepts, they're all very interesting. But there's a few things that I have a few issues conceptually with Absolute Batman. There's some really interesting stuff going on in all 3 books. What I'm going to go over is my personal thoughts, a few of the changes for each character, and which one's my favourite at the end. So, one theme that I'm seeing through Absolute Batman and Absolute Superman is actually quite a key focus on social justice. So, in Absolute Superman, Superman is attacking corrupt mine owners and saving people who are being abused and worked to death in a mine. In Absolute Batman, because he isn't rich, because he's got much more of a street level background, which is funny because Batman's always been what's kind of referred to in comics as a street level hero, like Daredevil or Punisher or Luke Cage, but Batman has never really acted like a street level hero. He doesn't have those relationships that Absolute Batman does. So Absolute Batman is friends with a lot of the characters who would be his villains in the original comics. So Absolute Batman came first, and let's start with Absolute Batman. So Absolute Batman is written by Scott Snyder. I'm not 100% sure on the artist. I want to say Nick Dragotta, but I am quite bad at remembering names, as you guys know. So in Absolute Batman, we have a few big changes. So the number one change, the aspect that has been removed, is that Bruce is no longer rich. So because Bruce is no longer rich, he is in a very different place. So he's a civil engineer. His Batcave is the top of an unfinished skyscraper. His family doesn't have a butler, so Alfred never left MI6. So Alfred was an MI6 agent and is now, I believe he's still in MI6, but he's been sent to Gotham to investigate Batman and see what's going on with him. As the book starts, Bruce is already Batman, and one of the other big changes is that Bruce is like a bodybuilder now. So in order to, I guess the idea is that in order to compensate for his lack of, super billionaire body armor, he has bulked, and he is just gigantic. And this is probably my main complaint, actually, for the book. I don't know if you guys know any bodybuilders. I used to do CrossFit, and we would have guys who would come in and they would be bodybuilders and they'd want to do CrossFit. And one of the big problems that they had is that they couldn't move. They couldn't squat. They couldn't do a box jump. They couldn't run. A lot of bodybuilders were taking breaks, walking from the car to the gym. And if you're the size that Bruce is in Absolute Batman, and it's interesting because not everyone in Absolute Batman is like stylized. So if you look at it and you're like, oh well, it's a stylized, he's not a literal like bigger than the biggest wrestler you've ever seen. He actually is. Like, he is gigantic, he is lean, he is ripped, and like, yes, suspension of disbelief when you're watching a guy in a bat costume beat up criminals is probably important. However, I struggle with suspending my disbelief when I look at that and go like, he literally would like someone who is that size. To be that size, you can't have a job, you can't have like a life, you can't run around Gotham City at night every night. Like, you can't do that. And someone who is that size also could not run around Gotham rooftops, could not jump from rooftop to rooftop. Like, it's very, very like, it's just too unrealistic. And for a character like Batman, whose realism is actually, I would say, an integral part of the character, and it's like the realism of the humanity versus the supernatural threats. So things like the Joker, who is a very different character, or Killer Croc, who is a giant lizard man, or Clayface. Like, I think a big part of Batman is his, you could do this, but you couldn't do absolute Batman. It's just not possible, like, on any level. And that is a big problem that I have with the book, and I know that's probably something that only I have the problem with, but I also just think he kind of looks ridiculous. I think of the three characters, the absolute Batman is absolute the weakest character design. I think the artwork for everything but Batman, incredible, love it. I don't like the way that Batman looks, and I think he looks like he stands out and looks dumb. It doesn't look like cool, he looks dumb, and I think that if you had done like, if you had gone 70% of the way there, to where it is, it would be much more like likable and good and interesting. Like, if you watch Hollywood stars talk about doing shirtless scenes, right, and how they have to be like mega bolt, and they're like, yeah, I was like not really seeing straight, I'd been dehydrated for days, all this stuff, and it's like, you couldn't also be Batman and look like that. Anyway, so my other big problem with Absolute Batman is, and I'll tell you up front, that Absolute Batman is my least favourite of the three. I think they're all good, but Absolute Batman was one where like I wasn't bothered to check out issue 2, whereas I will be staying on for issue 2 of Absolute Superman and Absolute Wonder Woman. Absolute Batman is that he's still middle class. He's a civil engineer. He's lives in a nice house. He's got family around him, and I think that maybe this is like me viewing this from a more of a socialist lens, but like, if Bruce is a civil engineer and has had the resources to go to college to study that sort of thing, there's a lot of like, well, actually Bruce is still a very privileged individual, and I feel like maybe not so much as taking away the money, but taking away the privilege would have been a more interesting view on Batman. Like, where do we get a Batman who doesn't have any resources because he's on the poverty line? He's sacrificing everything to try and protect the people that he loves, the city that he loves. I think that that's maybe a more powerful concept. Seeing a middle-class white person beat up people who are having to resort to crime, I think still has a bit of a like bad taste, in the same way that you see, people say that Bruce Wayne, a rich middle-class white man, not middle class, a rich upper class white person beating up people with mental health problems is problematic. I think that we are still at the point where like, do we need this? Like, could we have maybe taken that a bit further? So like, less of the bodybuilding, more of the class discussion, class warfare, socialism. That would have been, to me, a more interesting book. Moving on. Absolute Wonder Woman. Absolute Wonder Woman has the best art of all of them. The art, I have to say, can't remember the artist's name. However, I will try and put it in the description box below. Absolute Wonder Woman is cool as hell. It feels almost like it was inspired by Berserk. Not just because Diana has a gigantic sword, but because it's kind of like a bit grimdark, but in a way that like actually really works for Wonder Woman as a character. So Diana is, all the Amazons are like killed off. Diana is rescued and brought to hell, and she's given to Circe, the usually Wonder Woman villain, to raise as a child. And Circe's like, I don't want any part of this. And the like demons or whatever are like, well, tough luck. And she has to raise Diana, and eventually she grows to love her, and they build this mother and daughter bond. And then Diana kind of escapes out of hell into the real world, and she rides a skeletal Pegasus, and like faces off against a giant demon. The opening issue of Absolute Wonder Woman is very strong on the vibes, and I really, really want to see where this goes. Basically, I have to say, no negatives at all on this. It was absolutely fantastic. I think when I read Absolute Superman, I was like, oh, this one is my favourite, definitely. But actually, going back to Absolute Wonder Woman, I think it was just kind of kick-ass. Like, it was over-the-top action, really kick-ass, really cool to look at, great storyline, and the writing's really good. And I know that Kelly Thompson's got the goods. She's an absolutely fantastic writer, so I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing the next issue of Absolute Wonder Woman. I don't know if it's out yet. It might actually already be out. If it is, I'll have to pick that up. The first issue of all of these I just bought on Amazon. I do have the DC Infinite sub, but I didn't want to wait, so I bought all of them. But the rest, Absolute Batman, I'll definitely wait. But the rest, I don't know. I'll think about it. So yeah, finally, let's move on to Absolute Superman. And Absolute Superman I liked as well. I thought that it's really interesting that the writer, and I have to say, I actually can't remember the name of the writer even on Absolute Superman. So again, it'll be in the description. I really, really liked that. Even though we took away the concept of Superman being raised on Earth by the Kents, he's still raised by a farmer, because Jor-El and Lara are farmers. So, well, Jor-El's a farmer and Lara is a like a mechanic, basically. Both of them were supposed to be scientists, but got thrown out of the science academy for like dangerous ideas. And a lot of the book has to do with kind of the original concept of Superman. So the original concept of Superman in the very, very early issues is basically almost, they're like very socialist. And Superman was basically, his first villains were corrupt bosses, were abusive factory owners and all this sort of stuff. And he, Superman wasn't fighting Brainiac. He was fighting, he was fighting the like corruption and that sort of stuff. And I found that theme pulled across now into Absolute Superman to be very interesting. And I'd be really interested to see a more political Superman, because I think that the character is kind of inherently political, because it's basically a god on Earth. And like, there's a lot of discussion around Superman as like, well, if Superman basically knows everything that's happening, has superhuman speed, so can react to all these disasters and all this stuff, like, should Superman be pulling the cat out of the tree, or should he be deposing a dictator? Should he be helping the fire department put out a fire, or should he be disarming the nuclear, nuclear arsenal around the world. And in fact, there is one Superman story where he just flies around and pulls all the nuclear missiles out of the silos and flies them into space. And he's like, "That's it. No nuclear weapons from now on. That's it. I won't allow it." I think that's a Elseworld story. But I would be super interested to see where we go with this absolute Superman. I really liked the suit that he wears, and the the interpretation now of the crest, the S crest, not being like the family crest, but actually being the signifier of being part of the labour class, like the lowest class of Kryptonian society. And obviously there's a big class element in both Batman and Superman, but I think that the Superman one is very interesting because he is like a refugee. He's an immigrant from this destroyed society. He's grown up on Krypton, and yeah, there's a really good bit at the beginning where Jor-El's like, "Oh, where's Kal-El or whatever," and he turns up and he's like 17. So seeing a younger Superman, seeing a Superman who wasn't born on Earth, raised on Earth, really interested to see the interpretation of how he reacts to our society kind of grow and change, and also interested to see if the Kents do still get involved, because I do think the Kents are kind of, like we say, they're an integral part of Superman's lore and history. I'd be interested to see how this Superman interacts with those characters, because I do hope that still happens. Anyway, comic book videos are something that I really love doing. I don't do them very much because people don't watch them, don't enjoy watching them. But if you have enjoyed this one, please give this one a like. Please drop down in the comments below and let me know your preference. Which one's your favourite? Absolute Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman? And if there's anything else you want to chat about with comics, give me some recommendations, tell me your favourites, do so down below. If you haven't subscribed, please do, and I will probably catch up with the Marvel Ultimate Universe at some point soon and do like a year in review video. If you'd be interested in that also, let me know. Please subscribe to the channel and I will speak to you guys soon.